I know you love earning travel rewards and cash back, and that's why you're going to love Rakuten. With Rakuten, you can earn cash back on everything you need to book your dream trip, hotels, flights, rental cars, experiences, and more, while still booking through your favorite travel sites. And don't worry, cash back can be earned on top of earning the credit card points and the hotel and airline loyalty points that matter most to you, depending on how you make your booking. Plus, with Rakuten, you can also earn cash back on groceries and other purchases like electronics, pet supplies, and more. And the best part, you can join today for free and start earning cash back on top of your travel rewards. Go to Rakuten.com or get the app. That's Rakuten, Rakuten. Rakuten, the most rewarding way to shop.
The goal was simply to go until I quit, whatever that looked like. In my head, I thought I'd get tired, but you go to sleep and you wake up, you have energy again. So, throughout the trip, there was lots of reasons I might have stopped. I could have got injured. Maybe I met someone that got me to stop. I wasn't sure exactly what the end looked like, but the goal was simply to go until I couldn't go anymore. I didn't actually have any destination at all.
That is today's guest, Jacob Lemanski, and that was his mindset going into this self-supported bicycle ride, this solo trip that in the end ended up spanning 38,000 miles across 6 continents and took him twice around the world, 2 times. His goal of no goal is both Zen and Forrest Gump in nature. I mean, come on, who of us has not had that sort of Forrest Gump fantasy where we just spontaneously take off and keep going until we get tired and want to go home? Well, in this episode, Jacob shares the story behind how his counterintuitive strategy of going until I feel like quitting led to 3 years of unplanned adventures across 6 continents. What living without a schedule for 1,000 days taught him about presence. What hundreds of days of solitude taught him about himself and the world, practical insights on funding long-term adventures, including how much his journey cost, the benefits and challenges of human-powered travel by bike, how he transformed his experiences into art and entrepreneurship, and loads more. It's a wonderful conversation, and it's happening in this episode right now. So buckle up, strap in. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey, it's Jason here with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show. Thanks for hanging out, letting me bring a little travel into your ears today. This is the show to help you travel the world on your terms, to fill your life with as much travel as you desire, no matter what your situation or experience. If I sound a little funny, I don't know. I was at the dentist 2 days ago, and I swear the side of my face is still numb. She put an incredible amount of Novocaine into my jaw. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Today, it's a wonderful episode with Jacob Lemanski from howtomovethestars.com. He also has a podcast of the same name that is a day-to-day retelling of his bicycle ride twice around the world, starting from the beginning, that gives you the whole story. It's based on his journals. And during the trailer for his podcast, and I found this on his website, it said right in the beginning, I left to ride a bicycle as far as I could. I never expected to go as far as I did. And that's why this story fascinated me, because in a culture where grand adventures are often built around a specific goal. You can think about somebody's going to summit the 7 summits or walking around the world or something like that. Jacob had no big goal other than an intention to go out and experience the world, yet something kept him going for 1,000 days and 38,000 miles and 6 continents and twice around the world on his bike. So I know you're going to love this one. Stick around on the back end. I'll leave you with a quote to wrap this one up. Don't forget, by the way, you can join the community off the podcast over at zerototravel.com/newsletter. Plenty of practical tips, advice, fun links, and all that stuff going out in the newsletter once a week, and it's free. You can sign up over there if you haven't done so. Thanks for listening. Now, please enjoy my conversation with Jacob, and I will see you on the other side, my friend. Cheers. Jacob Lemanski, welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend. Thanks for
Thank you.
Thanks for showing up so early out in Denver, Colorado. And I used to be based in Boulder, so we would have been doing this in person back in my former life. How you doing?
Oh, I'm good. We have some cold weather here, so I'm glad winter's finally arrived.
I'm excited to talk to you about your, what I'm calling like Forrest Gumpian trip in a way. Well, I mean, you sent me the email and you said, quote, "I went on a journey to ride my bicycle until I quit. I had this idea that only in getting to a place where I could go no further would I know that I went as far as I could." And that last part, getting to a place where I could go no further, would I know that I went as far as I could? What did that mean to you? Because those are the words, but that's a feeling, man. That's like a intuitive thing. And I mean, we can get to this later at the end of the trip, what that feeling was, if it matched up with what you thought it would be. But going into the trip, what did that mean to you?
The goal was simply to go until I quit, whatever that looked like. In my head, I thought I'd get tired, but you go to sleep and you wake up, you have energy again. So, throughout the trip, there was lots of reasons I might have stopped. I could have got injured. Maybe I met someone that got me to stop. I wasn't sure what the end looked like, but the goal was simply to go until I couldn't go anymore. I didn't actually have any destination at all.
Pretty tired. Think I'll go home now. That's like the Gump
basically
line, right? All right. Why did you choose this framework then instead of like having an end date or, saying I'm going to cycle around the world and like I'm just going to go until I make it? And why bike on that note?
I've done some adventures before. I hiked the Appalachian Trail, and I had done some bike touring, and I just like the pace of bike touring the most. And as far as doing a long adventure, I guess when I headed off, my intention was to bike around the world, and I just thought I would quit out there. My longest bike tour prior was 2 months, and by the end of that, I was about ready to be done. So I thought I might be going for 3 to 6 months, somewhere in there. I never expected that I would be out for 3 years.
I mean, financially, did you have the means to be out for 3 years? Like, how did that work financially? I'm also going to be fishing for some advice here for anybody coming out of this. You might be inspiring them to be like, like open-ended trip. I'm going to go as far as I can. I like that idea, but there's like sort of the practical things to balance as well, like finances. How did you manage all that stuff?
Yeah, my background is engineering, and I had worked for 6 years. I had about 60 grand saved up before I left. And the whole trip was 1,000 days, and it cost me $24,000. Most of those bike pairs, flights were the big expenses. And then otherwise I was homeless. I slept outside, and I would just buy bread at grocery stores. So it was a cheap trip. And while I was out there, I had more money than I could see the end of the way that I was living. So my finances were in place, and really traveling like that with no destination and no financial constraints, it allowed me to be very present. I could exist just right in the moment because I wasn't thinking about a destination. My schedule was clear for the rest of my life. And living that way for a long time, it really allowed me to find a presence that was, I don't know, I never experienced it before.
Yeah. Living without a schedule for the rest of my, that's, I think some people right now are thinking that sounds like the dream. Thinking back to the bike tour you did prior that you mentioned, the 2-month bike tour, was that a set 2 months, a set route?
Yeah, I was going coast to coast across the United States. I was 20 when I did that trip, and it's a new experience. That trip I started, I didn't even know how to fix a flat tire. I went into it totally ignorant of the whole experience. But that's how I learned and got better, and had the confidence to try and bike around the world.
We can kind of compare these two because that was you're like, I'm going to bike across the country. This is what it is. You know roughly how long it's going to take, roughly. And you mentioned being tired at the end. Do you think that type of tiredness, or just kind of like being ready to be off the road, didn't really come into play for so long because this was open-ended? Like, do you think that if this wasn't open-ended, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy in travel?
Mm-hmm. There was a whole emotional arc to being out there for 1,000 days. I actually started off with a girlfriend. The trip was so long that she was married to someone else before I ended.
Says it all.
but I started with a girlfriend. And so, home was like back where she was. And, I was pulled back emotionally to Boulder in a way. But at some point we broke up and I kept going, and kind of that connection was lost. And, even my sense of home shifted. It started off as Boulder, and then I was out there so long that it felt like nowhere was my home. But then I slept out in the wild and in the forest and out in the farm fields so often that eventually everywhere felt like my home. And since I didn't have a destination and I didn't have any history or any past pulling me back to a location, it just allowed me to exist in the moment. That was fine and invigorating for a long time. I'd say the first 700 days. And then I got to the tip of South America, and, I wanted to bicycle home. Soldiers used to walk home from the war, or explorers after sailing to the other side of the world, they had to go home at the pace of the wind. And I wanted that sense of being an explorer as well. I wanted to go home slowly. And at that point, this would be, say, the last 300 days of the trip. That got really hard when I did have a destination, when I did have somewhere to go that was a continent away. So much work ahead of me. So being out there and not having to think about anywhere that I needed to get to is really what allowed me to go so far. Otherwise, if I left at the beginning thinking I'll be out there for 1,000 days, I don't know if I would have left. It would have been too much to ask.
Too overwhelming, right? It's not very often, actually, it's never that I've heard the last 300 days of the trip.
Exactly.
But man, I admire the sort of the purity of it, right? Like you used the metaphor, the analogy, I guess, of the sailors going with the wind, or, it's kind of how it was. You had to get back. There was back in the day, there was not going to be a, last minute plane ticket you could grab or something like that. And so just like the purity of that, I don't mean to harp on like sort of the endless journey, like going off, but I think that is one of the big themes I wanted to discuss here, because, as I'm thinking about this, when you, like you said, when you have a destination or you have a goal, like cycling across the United States, as you approach the end of it, your mind's going to be working in a different way. Like you might be thinking about, oh, what am I going to do after this? Or what's my next trip even? Knowing like some people in this audience. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's another factor bringing you back to the present, which is so powerful. What did the like sort of presence, the many days, weeks, months of sort of like full on presence teach you about yourself?
I was out there by myself a lot. The trip was 1,000 days, about 870 days I was alone. It's a lot of time without any human mirrors, to reflect how I'm acting in the world. And let me see if that's good or bad or strange, depending on people's reactions. I was just out there alone. And to go for so long alone like that, I'd say it allowed me to become exactly who I am. Right. I could just be myself without anyone telling me a different way to be. And after 3 years of that, it can become strange. Being that present, it got to a point, towards the end, like in Africa, say 900 days in, I got to the point where I was even thinking like, I'm doing this, I'm riding my bike. If I were to die, I would just be doing that. I would just be dead. So even just thinking about death became just like, oh, I can just do that in the present as well. So, the thinking gets kind of strange to be out there for so long.
You said the trip helped you become who you are? Did it do that more than it just revealed what was already there in a way?
Well, it allowed me to lean into all my eccentricities, basically.
What eccentricities? I want to hear them.
I remember I worried that I'd become unrelatable out there on that journey because, who can relate to such a thing? And I was coming back home. I was just a few days from finishing. I stopped at a friend's house. He took me in for a couple nights, and I was explaining this to him, and he goes, "You know what? You were strange when you left too." And honestly, it really made me feel much better.
Comforting words. That's beautiful though. Well, I mean, among this audience anyway, you're not strange. You're just another one of those awesome travelers that we love hearing stories from. Speaking of the stories from the road, I wanted to hear more about perhaps some of the people you met who changed you. I know you were alone a lot, but there must have been some people along the way who still perhaps even impact you to this day. Can you share a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I met a man named Max in Central America, and he came along at just the right time. I was kind of on a schedule, even though I didn't have anywhere to go or anything to do. I was trying to chase the weather. I was trying to get to southern South America before the winter hit, and so I was pushing pretty hard, biking every day, doing maybe a few more miles each day than was comfortable for my legs. And I met Max, and he taught me how to slow down. He actually showed me how to buy marijuana out there. So I started smoking pot and biking a little less, and I gave up on trying to arrive for the weather anywhere. And he's one of these people that helped me become even, more still, more present, more patient, which is that's the name of the game for a 1,000-day bike ride.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear because in my head, I was like, you can't slow down more than you already have at that point. Fully present, just biking from place to place, yet you still slow down even more, which is...
Well, my bike computer broke around the same time. And the people on long trips like this, it's impressive, but it's especially impressive to the person doing it. Like we know how hard it is, and it's visceral how much effort we're putting into it. So keeping track of the miles, the tens of thousands of miles, it's fun in a way, and it's bragging, and as much as anything, it's just bragging to yourself. And around the time I met Max, my bike computer broke. So this number of, say, 50 miles a day no longer became important. And if I did less, I didn't have this emotion of like, I should have went further. It was a lot of just like stripping away of everything, really. Eventually, I was just like on the head of a pin, just perfectly balanced in the moment.
You mentioned your engineering background and working for 6 years leading up to this trip. I mean, there is, we both grew up in the United States, so there is this sort of Western mindset around being productive and getting things done and, having goals and achieving them and things like that. Was part of this detaching from that conditioning?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a high achiever. That was partly why I wanted to go on this trip. I wanted to go fail at something. I wanted to fail to go further. I just didn't expect it to take so long. Even the idea of going as far as I could, just for me, if I stopped after 300 days, everyone would have still been impressed. And I went another 700 days after that just for me. So, I was removed from having to achieve anything, but also any day I took off, I didn't have anything to do. So I had this idea, I can't get anywhere if I don't go anywhere. So I would just always stay on the move. And if it was a short day or a long day, eventually I didn't care about that part of it.
What's your relationship with quote unquote failure now?
It'd be hard to say my trip was anything but a success, but really what it did, it taught me what my limits were. I was finding the edge of my abilities. And there's a lot to be said for that. Even the idea of if I were to run out of food, like I knew I was fine for a few days because I had biked a few days without food. So um, it kind of just the whole trip just kept expanding my confidence in all these different realms and finding the limits of what I can do. Um, really made me feel much more capable, I guess.
We'll get back to the interview in just a moment. I know you love earning travel rewards and cash back, and that's why you're going to love Rakuten. With Rakuten, you can earn cash back on everything you need to book your dream trip, hotels, flights, rental cars, experiences, and more, while still booking through your favorite travel sites. And don't worry, cash back can be earned on top of earning the credit card points and the hotel and airline loyalty points that matter most to you, depending on how you make your booking. Plus, with Rakuten, you can also earn cash back on groceries and other purchases like electronics, pet supplies, and more. And the best part, you can join today for free and start earning cash back on top of your travel rewards. Go to Rakuten.com or get the app. That's Rakuten, Rakuten. Rakuten, the most rewarding way to shop.
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number, 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number, save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.
Now, back to the show. There must be, I would imagine, an incredible sense of freedom that comes with that experience too, knowing you went out your door and then you could just think of this montage of incredible experiences and crazy experiences and scary experiences or whatever that you had over 1,000 days and coming back home. And that all of that is right out of your doorstep still, all human powered. I love these human powered adventures because there is something inspiring about it, but also I feel like there's an added sense of freedom where you're just like dependent on your body to get you there. Obviously your vehicle is your bike, but
yeah. I bicycled, I crossed 2 points that were diametrically opposite on the earth, complete opposite sides of the globe. And once I did that, I knew that from anywhere in the world, I could bicycle to anywhere else in the world. So I had just done it.
That's amazing.
And the human poweredness, the story of my podcast is called How to Move the Stars. And that name comes from when I was in Alaska, I could find the North Star. And in Alaska, it's way up over your head. It's high in the sky. And as I pedaled south, I watched that star drop to the horizon. And then the Southern Cross started to come up. So just under my own power, with the strength of my legs, I was moving the stars in the sky. And, that's profound to know that I could do such a thing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, on the note of the podcast, how is it going? How has it been to recant all of these adventures and kind of relive them through your journal? Because I know the concept from what you told me, and let's hear it from you. So since you're here, and then I'd love to hear more about like how it's been for you to revisit this trip day by day.
Yeah, I traveled. I kept a journal mostly for something to do, but I would send it to my friends and I would monologue, I'd monologue into my journal and then email it to my friends. And that was all the company I needed, apparently. And so I returned home with just this tome, this huge, thick this story, and it was just so big and so close to me. I just didn't have any ability to shorten it. And so I started editing my journal, and I'm doing a day by day retelling, which is that journal, rewritten to be not just a first draft, but a well told story. And yeah, it's kind of an art project. It comes out twice a week, and it's 1,000 episodes. So it'll be 10 years that this comes out. And the idea is I want to bring people to that moment I quit. It was profound for me, and I want people to understand it. And to do that in a shorter story, I think misses the point. I want to bring people all the way there with me. So the podcast, it's kind of an unusual format. I think of it more of an art project. What will people feel after listening for 10 years around the entire earth twice, and come to that point with me where I can't go any further? I hope they get it. Like that's what I'm trying to create.
I think it's a great way to think of it as an art project too. It adds a whole different dimension to it. What was I don't want to say the number one or the hardest or whatever, but something that jumps to mind when I ask you this next series of questions. What would you say is the most beautiful thing about the trip? One of the most beautiful.
I think you'll hear it from a lot of people that travel, but just the interaction with strangers every single day was always a fun experience. Just out on a bicycle like that, people can walk right up to you, very approachable. I can't get away, and I'm alone. If I was even with one other person, I think a lot less people would come up to me. But I was just so approachable out there. Especially once people heard what I was doing, they were just compelled to help because it was so hard. So in 1,000 days, I think there was maybe 4 days where I did not talk to a single person. So there was always interactions out there, and people all over the world were excited to meet me. I felt like a celebrity in a lot of places.
When were you most afraid?
Honestly, in 1,000 days, there was maybe 10 times that I almost got really hurt or killed in some way. Usually cars out of control, something, bad road conditions with traffic. But also there were interactions with people. I'll tell one story. I was in Central America and Honduras, which doesn't have the best reputation for safety. And I was there camping in the forest one night, and someone spotted me as I was setting up, and I said hello and told them I would be camping there. And they didn't speak English, and I didn't speak Spanish very well. And they nodded their head, and it seemed fine. And they went off. And then around dusk, 5 men came back, and they had guns and they had ski masks, and they wanted to know who I was. And it turns out they were just a neighborhood watch. They were just checking on me to keep their community safe. And they said, stay here. To get back on the road would be dangerous, but now that we know you're here, you're safe. But until I got that information, it was kind of terrifying.
When you think about the neighborhood watch, you don't necessarily jump to ski masks and guns.
What really caught me was just, you don't need ski masks in Honduras unless you're doing something nefarious. So just that they all had ski masks just bothered me in the first place.
Yeah. Understandable. Wow. Intense. What was one of the more memorable days you had on the road? Perhaps one that sticks out the most, and why?
Down through the Andes in Central America was really a major highlight of the whole trip for me. I had been out about 600 days, so I was really strong. I was still feeling really good about being out there. And those mountains are just really huge and beautiful. And there was a day I bicycled all the way up to 17,100 feet. I climbed up this old dirt mining road up to the top of this mountain, and the sky is so clear and the stars are so bright out there at that elevation. And also, it was really cold. And so I climbed up to the top of this mountain, and I arrived around midnight, and there happened to be this glass pyramid that is probably like a lookout or something that someone had built and abandoned long ago. And I ended up sleeping in that glass pyramid that night, and it was so cold that frost formed on the glass and all over my face and sleeping bag, and I laid there just hugging myself tightly, but the air was also really thin, and as I would squeeze my chest, I couldn't get deep breaths, and I would wake up short of breath because it was so because I was squeezing my lungs and it was so cold. And anyways, it was a long night, but what a beautiful experience to be so close to the stars and looking out at the mountains. And there was lots of experiences like that, just finding myself in these profoundly beautiful situations.
That's fascinating that you chose that one, because there was the element of beauty with like the stars and the finding this glass pyramid, but also the struggle of not being able to breathe so well. And it is kind of a good representation of perhaps what a trip like this is. You have the struggles and the difficulties, but also within that are these is the beauty in some ways.
Yeah, it's a total balance.
Yeah.
I would find myself in beautiful places all the time, and remind myself that I had pedaled 2 years to get there.
Right.
and so it makes it that much sweeter.
Yeah. Well, on the places, I'm wondering because you didn't have a plan, like we talked about. How did you handle it in terms of the routing? Did you choose the countries, or did they choose you in some ways?
So it was, my route started in Portugal, and I was going to go east until I hit the next coast. And then I started up in Alaska. I was going to go south until I hit the southern tip of South America. These long routes to just point one direction. In a lot of countries, there's not like a ton of roads everywhere. That's not necessarily the case. Say East Coast United States, there's roads everywhere, but in a lot of countries, there's one highway, one in one direction through the country. And so just to head one direction for so long, it kind of, I ended up being just on the most likely route, I guess. And I would meet other cyclists out there for that reason, because they're also just like on the one road going the direction we need to go. So as far as route finding, I had a map. I would look ahead, make sure, see where the next town was, so I knew how much food to buy. But I was just going south. It didn't really matter how I got there. I would just kind of take the most direct route.
Just heading in this direction.
I would just go in one way. And that was my thing. I like crossing. I like crossing countries. I would meet cyclists. They would just be in one country and just be, exploring, going back and forth. But to me, traversing was really interesting, to cross over a mountain range, to cross into new climates. And you gotta go a long ways for that.
How about traveling in your home country? Was there anything surprising that you learned about your home country that the trip revealed to you? Like perhaps has it changed the way you see your home country in any way? Of talking about the United States, of course.
Yeah, biking in the United States. The roads are nice, of course. I notice people that would meet me and want to help me in the US, they would give me cash. And in other countries, they would give me food. Was one difference I noticed. And honestly, the only time I've set up camp and someone chased me off and told me to leave was in the United States. So I don't know if that's representative, but it did happen to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where was that? Just out of curiosity.
It was Southern California. but so I came down. Came down into Montana. I went to Glacier National Park, and then down through the Sierra. Saw the redwoods, Sequoia National Park, Yosemite. It was really biking down through the United States was really a beautiful section of the trip. And especially, I camped in a hammock the whole time. I mean, I had a tent when there was no trees, but mostly I slept in my hammock. And I got to tie my hammock up to sequoia trees, which was the photos are just they're just funny to see a trunk 3 times wider than the hammock itself.
Yeah. What's your relationship with serendipity? How do you contextualize things when you experience that on the road? Is there like a spiritual element of that to you, or is it just more, this was just coincidence? I'm sure things happen on the road that were kind of, wow, that's crazy. I'm out of water and somebody just showed, you hear these stories a lot. I'm just wondering, for you, what is that relationship?
Well, I guess I think of it as I'm a pretty lucky guy in general. So, these times that I needed water and it showed up, that it did always happen. Or the times that it didn't happen, I went thirsty until it did. So, I don't know. I don't put any higher meaning to these chance encounters that were fortuitous or not. Like I said, I was so present. I was just taking everything as it came without expectation.
What are some of the lessons you learned that keep showing up years later?
Well,
are they still showing up?
It's interesting. So I did the trip from 2013 to 2016. So I'm 9 years removed from it now, and I'm still doing the writing. I'm still editing my journal. And right when I got back, I was the person that just finished that trip. And now 9 years later, I'm reintegrated into society a little more. And reading my journal is no longer like just myself talking to myself, but it's reading somebody else's journal from years ago. So, I've continued to grow. I guess what sticks with me is, I still know what I'm capable of, having done that trip. That's still with me. And, I'm still very patient.
Yeah. I mean, you cycled around the world twice. Nobody can ever take it away from you.
Basically,
you know what you did. It's pretty incredible. The time when you were deciding to get off the road, and I know you're, bringing people up to that point in a way that we can't do here with your podcast with the 1,000 episodes, which is also very poetic, like 1,999 days or 1,000 days. You said what are the chances you landed on that number? But anyway,
I'd stopped counting maybe 500 days in. And, one thing to go that long, what does motivate someone to go another day after they've gone 920 days? Why do 921? If I were to do 921 just to count another day, it would have been insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
So I got to 999, and when I finished, like I said, I hadn't been counting for over a year. So it just was lucky that's
wow.
Kind of strange that it landed right on 999.
Yeah. Leading up to that, did you have any false alarms that you thought you were like, day 400, you're like, I'm done?
Well, it got harder by the end. It was, like I said, the return journey was different emotionally than the way out. And I ended up quitting in Africa. I was in Africa for about 100 days. And, partly what got me was just the roads were really straight and flat. And I had done straight and flat roads before. And I don't know, eventually I just couldn't do it anymore. And when I stopped, if I could have teleported home, I would have. I was just so ready to be done. But, that's not an option. It actually took me another 50 days to get home. I had to, because I was out there in the middle of Africa. Like no one was coming for me. So, I would just say that last stretch in Africa that last 100 days was really hard. And then once I made the decision, that last 50 days to get home was even harder. But up to that point, I was really inspired and just happy to be out there and continuing on.
Yeah. Was it hard to settle back into quote regular life? You talked about, you're reintegrated to an extent into society again 9 years later, but I'm sure that happened sooner. I mean, what did the process look like for you going from this lifestyle of just endless travel to now I'm going to be, going back to not necessarily to the status quo, but just like sort of a more regular, again, air quotes, life. I mean, and do you have any advice to share for anybody else going through that process?
Yeah, I guess I didn't expect it to be hard for me, but in practice, it really kind of was. I had my engineering degrees. I always thought I'll just go back and get a job just as soon as I need to. But of course, that wasn't the first thing I did when I got home. Um, I got home, I started living with a friend, and I ended up living in a garage because it was like half inside and half outside. That's where I felt comfortable.
You're like, I'm not going all the way inside. I'm only going halfway inside.
Basically, like I continued to sleep in my hammock. I just hung it in the backyard. And for another 8 months after I got back, like through another winter, I just kept sleeping in my hammock because that just seemed to make the most sense to me. And I lived in a garage, feeling the weather. And what I did when I got back, I was, my background in engineering, mechanical engineering specifically, I hadn't got to design and build things for years by that point. And I was so inspired by that journey. And I just wanted to create something beautiful. And I started making art. And I made art for a year and a half before I actually calmed myself down enough to go get a 9-to-5 job is how long it took me. Advice or getting back, it's if you travel for less than a year, I think probably coming back's pretty easy. I was gone for so long that my relationships with people had new partners, they had kids that were growing, they were in new jobs, they were in new cities. If you go for less than a year, you can come home and things are pretty much the same. But to go for 3 years, now other people's lives are starting to change as well. And so, just fit myself back into all of that was, it was a process that I think I'm still working on.
We'll get back to the interview in just a moment. Now, back to the show. Well, you ended up starting your art and clothing line, I guess. You can tell us more about it. We'll link up to it, antlife.space. I mean, sounds like it's a natural extension of what you were compelled to do after you came home, which was create art. And this is premium art and clothing designed to enhance your psychedelic experience. So I want to learn more about why you started the Ant Life and your, like, what role psychedelics have played in your personal journey.
Well, I traveled. The only thing I missed from what I left at home was this ant farm that I had built. And ant farms, for anyone who don't know, it's two panes of glass about a 1/4 inch apart, half filled with soil, and then you put ants in there. And as the ants dig, you can see the tunnels forming. And I had built one of these, and while I traveled, I missed it like a pet. So I came home and I got that old ant farm restarted, and I was out looking at it one night, looking at my ants, and I had set a little light bulb behind it so some light shined out through the tunnels, and it was like a little art piece, but nothing refined. But I liked that thing. And I was looking at it one night, and my roommate came out and gave me the first hit of LSD I ever tried. And printed on the blotter paper was a little ant, an antacid. Someone was making a joke. And tripping that night with my ant farm, I conceived to build the world's most beautiful ant farm, one for adults. And I took to that task just the same way I took to biking as far as I could. I took the concept of an ant farm as far as I possibly could. So what I ended up with was an ant farm. It's the size of a sheet of plywood. It's 4 feet by 8 feet. The background, I created a background, which is a nebula. It's a Hubble image. It's 50 light years across of this cloudy, colorful space. And then within the frame, I embedded LED lights that change color. So these color changing lights shine in the background, which causes the background to change color. And then in front of all that is the ants, and they're creating their tunnels. And it's a living art piece. They'll live in there for a year, and it slowly evolves what you're looking at, changing every day a little bit. And it was just so beautiful that I couldn't let it go. My background isn't art, and in a way, I wish it could have just been a hobby that I let go. But what I created was so magnificent that I had to create a company, and just I've just continued to pursue it. And there's a lot of parallels with that art piece and the journey, just because it is always changing. The art only exists in the present. You can take a photo, but it's going to change in an hour. And also, once you stick those ants in, you can't rush it. Those, just like biking around the world, it just takes as long as it takes. So the artwork, it was, it really was how I integrated my experience of that trip. And the psychedelics was, that was, I would take some drugs, and I would sit with my art and think about my bike ride. It's how I integrated the journey. Yeah. And it was, what I created was just, it's really beautiful, and on the right drugs, it's profoundly beautiful. So I guess that's my experience with it.
Can you send us a picture of that ant farm you created so we can post it up in the show notes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, the takeaway for me there is like, everybody's got their own way of doing it, and your way might not be the same as Jacob's way, but I do think that this idea, the overarching concept of finding a way to integrate the lessons you learned from a profound experience, like a travel experience, into your daily life, that is an important part, I think, of coming home, which perhaps is a bit neglected. Perhaps there should be more conversation around that, or maybe people creating more space for themselves to have an integration period, and everybody is going to have their own version of that. For you, it was art and everything you just described. For somebody else, it might be, journaling or writing or doing a podcast project like you're doing. The sky's the limit, but just creating that space for yourself. It sounds like you were pretty intentional with that at a certain point, which I think is super important and cool.
Yeah. Well, I made it another year and a half after that trip before I did run out of all my money, and then and then it was time. And then it was time to go get a job.
Right. And what are you doing now?
Well, I'm still doing the art. And then alongside this podcast, I've started a bike touring company. So I lead people on e-bike tours here in Colorado. I do 1 day, 3 day, and 8 day tours just through the mountains, and just share my love of bike touring with people in Colorado. And Colorado, it's one of the most beautiful places I've ever bicycled. So that's saying something coming from me.
Yeah, absolutely. My heart's still in Colorado in many ways. What's the name of the bike tour company so people can check it out?
That's Mountain High Bicycle Tours.
Okay.
Just find it at mountainhighbicycletours.com.
And howtomovethestars.com for the podcast. We'll link up to all this stuff, and hopefully we get the pictures. We can post that so people can see this ant farm, which you're only seeing it in that exact moment the picture was taken, as you said. Just a couple more things before we let you go. Yeah. How has it been to share your love of bike touring with others, with the company? Because, you were on your own, like you said, for so long. And this is a totally different dynamic where you get to be with others and share the love of that.
Mm-hmm. It's great not to travel by myself, to see a beautiful sight and get to experience it with someone else. When I was alone, I would have people in my heart and my friends, and I would just imagine them there with me, and wonder why no one else has taken some time off to have such a beautiful experience. But I understand we're all very busy. To actually travel with other people and point at my favorite sites and have them smile as well. Yeah, the connection is wonderful.
All right. Give us your best piece of travel advice.
I'll have it be bike tour specific. Um, I had a little mirror that I fastened right to my helmet. It was like on the brim of my helmet, and it allowed me to look back over my shoulder as I was traveling. And everywhere I went, that mirror was a great icebreaker because it was hanging right in front of my face, and people saw it and they understood what it was, and that was outside of any language. And they would point to it, and they'd walk around behind me and look in my mirror, and um, it was a great icebreaker. So, what advice could maybe have something that's forward facing that people can come up and ask you about. Whether it could just be a really colorful shirt, it could be a little mirror on your helmet, it could be anything, but just have something that's really inviting for people to come up and ask you about, and you can start conversations like that.
Your favorite stuffed animal strapped to your handlebars, whatever.
Something,
yeah, something
totally.
unique. Yeah, awesome. I know we can't possibly cover everything about this epic trip you took, but was there anything that just coming on this show that you wanted to kind of highlight or share? Anything we missed that I want to just give you an opportunity to share?
I would just say, follow along on the podcast. Each it's 2 minutes. They're short, and just see what kind of experience you have traveling along with me for a decade. Join in this art experience. I don't know what people will feel about about it, but you're going to come on a slow journey twice around the whole world. How fascinating. So I just encourage people to come join me on my trip.
Cool. Thanks, man. Thanks for getting up so early your time to be here today, and for just being generous with sharing. Appreciate it, man. I hope we can do it in person again the next time in person.
Absolutely. Let me know if you ever get back to Colorado.
Will do. Take care, Jacob.
Thanks, Jason. Have a good one.
There you have it. Thank you to Jacob for stopping by the show. Of course, check out his website, howtomovethestars.com, with a link to the video podcast experience of the same name. You can sort of relive the journey and dive deep on what that was like over there. I was looking for a quote to wrap this up, and it's funny because I was looking around for quotes about going until you quit. And a lot of these quotes are negative about quitting. I mean, look at this one from Vince Lombardi, who said, "Winners never quit and quitters never win," for example. Or Mike Ditka, 2 football coaches, "You're never a loser until you quit trying." Then you have quotes from people like Thomas Edison, who said, "Our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is always to try just one more time." Yet, you listen to this show. I mean, is it really a failure to quit? And then I found this quote from Winston Churchill, who said, "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." And it's funny, we use this word sort of quit, or he was done the trip. Really, it's not about quitting. It was about just being done. And that is different, I think, much different than quitting. And that's why I wanted to wrap up with this quote from C.S. Lewis, who said, "Hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny." I mean, if you're on the road for that long, you're going to experience some hardships, either internally or externally, most likely both. And sometimes the best goal is no goal, I suppose. If I haven't tried that in a while, I need to kind of tune into myself and figure out, hey, what's something I can do personally? Maybe this is a challenge for you coming out of this one. What's a goal I have, and how can I make it into a no goal type of goal situation? And will that help me in a different way? Will that take me around the proverbial world twice? Who knows? Some food for thought there as we get out of this one. Don't forget, zerototravel.com/newsletter if you haven't signed up over there. More good stuff happening off the pod. We'd love to keep in touch with you over there. And thank you so much for being a part of this listening community. I'll see you next time. Peace and love to you and yours. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by zerototravel.com. Ideas and advice to make your travel dreams a reality.